They crashed a train in my name. I made sure the next one carried theirs. If you're reading this, make a paper copy and tuck it behind something dull, an old manual, a box of bolts, a tax return. Screens lie easily. Paper resists. I was the lead safety engineer for the ETRM corridor, the high-speed spine that stitches the north to the south with steel and nervous pride. My badge unlocked interlockings that ordinary people never see. Rooms where trains are not so much moved as negotiated, where a green light is a contract and a red light is a prayer. In the control center we had a saying, 1 mistake is an anecdote, 2 is a trend, 3 is a funeral. I lived to keep us at anecdote. Then a freight consist ghosted into an occupied block, and someone put my initials in the margin of the incident form. There were no casualties, just a shuddering kiss between buffers and a yard of bent couplers. That word, just, makes me sick in retrospect. The footage ran on local TV anyway. Yellow line, red vests, a camera at a bad angle, a voiceover that confused ETCS with Wi-Fi. A talking head said my name like it was the nickname of a villain. By morning my license was suspended pending review. That phrase, the bureaucrat's scalpel, parted my future from my present without blood. They escorted me to my locker, a little blue coffin with a number I'd memorized on my first day. I turned in my orange vest and my YubiKey, the one with the chipped paint where it had lived with coins and stubbornness. My access to the RBC consoles winked out. The coffee machine refused my card as if machines practice solidarity where humans don't. The letter arrived by PC, certified like a birth and colder than a death. Immediate removal from safety-critical duties. The subject line included a protocol number and a CIG code from a tender I had lost sleep to write. In a footnote, I'd been reassigned to documentation backlog. That's where careers go to become minutes of meetings and number boxes. I went home to find a notice on my door. Unit subject to administrative seizure for pending claims. A company I'd never heard of had filed a precautionary lien against me for damages arising from negligence. The company's name, Marathon Stone SRL, looked like a mistranslation, and a threat had gotten married. Their lawyer cited recent events. My landlord, who had never mastered email salutations, sent "This is awkward" and a PDF of his nervousness. Dispossession comes in layers. First they took the badge, then the job, then the key to my own things. The last layer was belief. I watched people decide, efficiently, to believe the worst version of me because it fit the plot better. At the safety agency, and SFISA, I asked for the incident record. The clerk was polite to my face and tired to the bone. Modulo 04/SC80, Signora. 10 pages that smelled like dust and toner. It had times down to seconds. It had signatures that all slanted right in the same way. It said, human error cannot be excluded. A beautiful phrase. The possibility of possibility, locked in a sentence that was trying to be a mirror and a door at the same time. RFI, the infrastructure manager, promised a thorough investigation. The era demanded this promise. The rails demanded time. Meanwhile the vendor, Nordlicht Signal Italia, licensed to the hilt and allergic to blame, issued a statement that said nothing but sounded like a lullaby. Safety is our first priority. I slept on a friend's fold-out, measuring my life in coffee spoons and dead channels. I replayed the incident in my head. ETCS Level 2 RBC Authority. A train does not move without a movement authority packet signed by the RBC with keys from the KMC. Either the RBC miscomputed the authority beyond the end of safe block, or the train's onboard unit interpreted a ghost as green. Or someone told the system to pretend it was dark, so a flashlight could guide someone's favorite through. I went to the yard on my own dime. The couplers looked embarrassed. A man with a clipboard told me to go home. I nodded. I counted balises with my eyes anyway, like rosary beads snagged in gravel. I found a fresh scuff on a base plate, too clean for the story the forum wanted to tell. That scuff would matter later. It was the first small thing the big machine had failed to iron flat. "Do you want to be a hero?" my friend asked. "No," I said. "I want the truth on paper." "And if the truth hates you," he said. "Watch me," I said, and my voice surprised me. I knew how to read logs. Logs are the diaries of systems, and systems overshare. When Reedy sent me to documentation, I took the opportunity and turned it into a search warrant with my hands. I buried myself in Form A12, BS and RBC extract files, in Euroradio session key renewals and NTP drift reports, in spectral RF surveys and patch notes written by men who feared commas. In the week of the incident, I found a 41-second jitter in the NTP synchronization at the RBC in Pietrafera. 41 seconds is an eternity to a system that measures meters in time. It was not enough, by itself, to crash a train, but it was a warning light in a hallway where the bulbs are supposed to be boring. The jitter traced to a maintenance window for a patch. Nordlicht had deployed QX 51.2, a minor update with major attitude. The release note, 3 bullet points and a lie, said no functional changes. But the binary hash had changed in exactly the place the command parser lives. I wrote the code that tests those parsers for fun on Sundays. Fun came handy. I wrote to Ansfiza. Request for immediate access to technical annexes. I cited EN 50126 and 50128 and the principle of traceability. I cited the fact that my name was on a form and I had a right to my own shadow. Silence. I wrote to the KMC, which generates the Euroradio keys, to ask if any keys had been reissued that night. No anomalies, they said, but a junior staffer included an attachment by mistake, a screenshot of a graph with a small spike that had been clipped out of the PDF. I saved the PNG in 3 places and printed it because printers make better witnesses than clouds. The vendor held a technical clarification meeting. They invited everyone with a tie and excluded me because I was now documentation, which is like being furniture with fingers. I went anyway. I brought cookies. When the guard asked for my badge, I handed him the cookies and the smile of a woman who hates a locked door more than a locked jaw. He buzzed me in because his mother had taught him manners and because I looked like a person who belonged. In the glass box, they used words like degraded mode and fallback logic. They did not use error because where they come from, error is for the poor. Someone said maintenance interface, and the room got quieter as if the air had been instructed to act normal. Nordlicht had a feature for emergencies, maintenance dark. You turned it on to simulate a Belize failure so you could test how a train would react without terror. Only the manual called it something else. MD mode, 2 letters and a door. In MD mode, the RBC would accept certain test packets that would never, ever enter the real stream. They said that. They said never twice. My skin believed them and my brain did not. In the Pietrafera RBC logs, I found a packet that began like MD and ended like greed. A test command had been accepted while the MD flag was supposedly off. That should be impossible, the kind of impossible that makes you wonder who wrote the definition. When you want to break a lie, you need leverage. I needed a form the vendor could not refuse and a witness they could not buy. I found both in a place that smelled of paper and climate control, the Notified Body Certificate Repository. Nordlicht's QX 51.2 had been certified on the basis of a test report that assumed MD mode could never be invoked without a physical key switch in the IXL room. We had no key switch in Pietrafera. We had software, and software loves to be invited to parties. It's not SUP. I filed the obvious, a safety alert to RFI. I used the exact phrases you use when a system that should not be able to say yes is winking from across the room. I cited the test report number and the line on page 12 where words pretended to look exhausted by responsibility. I included copies. I printed them on DIN A4 and signed with a blue pen that would look nice in a courtroom. RFI responded by asking me to please route communications through my supervisor who was on leave. I routed them through a journalist instead, a woman who had been waiting for someone to speak like a manual. In the article she wrote, MD mode became maintenance dark, which fit the story better. She published the graph. She published my initials without my permission, which was a betrayal and an accelerant. Nordlicht called me. There's no such thing as maintenance dark, the head of Italy said, and I heard the capital letters in his throat. Then what does MD stand for? I asked. Metadata, he said. Watch me, I said, which doesn't answer a question but ends a call well. First victory. Ansfiza issued a preliminary order to disable MD across the corridor pending investigation. QX 51.3 came out like a blush. The RBCs behaved. Dispatchers slept a little. The lie loosened its belt, and Marathon Stone SRL withdrew the lean. I ate a bad pizza and exhaled. The victory tasted like cardboard and relief. It lasted 4 days. The victory turned on me like a rescue dog that remembers a hand it can't forgive. That week I received a message through PC with an attachment, a draft report on my behavior. It quoted emails I had sent, emails I had deleted, emails I had thought and erased before letters could reach each other. It included a draft of a journalist's article with a note in the margin. Find a way to attach this to her personally. The message came from an address that looked legitimate, first name.last name at the domain of a safety agency, but the signature was malformed. Disinformation in FO. Then someone did what I had accused Nordlicht of doing. They used MD without turning it on. A passenger service approaching Sincher had a momentary flicker of movement authority beyond a red. The driver did what training and fear mixed with honor teach you to do. He braked and swore and filed a report so perfect it could be framed. The press called it a near disaster. The agency called it a pattern. Nordlicht called it sabotage. They said my name. The police visited. Their questions were polite and shaped like accusations. Did I have administrative credentials? No. Did I know people who did? Yes, the way a person knows a doctor, by asking for better days. Had I been seen at Pietrafera after hours? Yes, with cookies. Did I think I was smarter than a system designed by 5 countries and 3 prime contractors? No. Did I act like it? Sometimes. Their notepads were quiet percussion. I realized something simple in the silence after. The harder you pull on a knot someone else tied, the tighter it gets around your wrists. The friend with the fold-out couch started locking his bedroom door. People get tired of being brave on your behalf. My lawyer, who was hard to scare and easy to disappoint, said, "You can press forward and risk prison, or you can negotiate for a desk and a boring retirement." "Is there a third door?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "You can win. But winning here means they lose, and people who are used to winning don't like losing. It makes them creative." "How creative?" I asked. He told me a story about a mayor, a swap, and a water plant. It ended with a man found to have resigned. His point was not subtle. The journalist texted me a screenshot of a message she'd gotten. "Be careful with your source. She has a history of mistakes." The message was sent from a prepaid phone at a very particular hour when most people are busy eating dinner and not busy framing a narrative. Her editors asked her to write a second piece with a more balanced tone, a synonym for bored. Nordlicht announced a bug bounty program. If you reported a vulnerability responsibly, they would reward you with a T-shirt and an NDA. They made T-shirts. They made it seem like their humility was an asset. Meanwhile, a maintenance contractor with fingerprints on the Pietrafera cabinet vanished into a vacation he had not planned, and his wife got a job at Marathon Stone SRL. I went down to the interlocking room at Sincher and pressed my hands against the cabinet where the keys hang on pegs. Pegboards tell the truth. The key for the physical MD switch that did not exist at Pietrafera existed at Sincher because Sincher had been modernized by a different conglomerate back when we still thought competition would save us. The key was missing. I signed the visit log, so carefully you could hear ink dry. Paper remembers. If they were going to turn me into a saboteur, I could do their job for them more honestly than they intended. Sabotage is loud. Truth is quiet but repetitive. I chose repetition. I built a wall of receipts. I requested hashes for the binaries from Nordlicht's trust service, not the marketing page. I requested the certificate chain for the Euro radio session keys. I requested GSMR BTS logs for the hours around both incidents. I requested the full, not just the parts that looked good. I used the new magic words from the Data Governance Act that had made bureaucrats learn new ways to say no. They said, "We will revert in due course," which is the cousin of go to sleep. I had an ally I had not counted on, a man named Federico in the KMC. He liked trains the way children do. He kept model locomotives on his desk and carried around a fluke multimeter like a priest with a relic. He looked at the Euro radio key rotation and said, "That's odd," in the voice of a person who knows the difference between odd and wrong. He showed me the rotation plan. Keys rotate on a schedule tighter than a drum. The rotations around Pietrafera were early, as if someone had decided to jog at midnight for no reason other than the joy of sweating. Early rotations have reasons. One of them is a device that shouldn't be there asking nicely to be introduced. We went to the tower. We opened a cabinet with a Torx T20 because engineers trust Torx like surgeons trust scalpels. Inside was as boring as a church until it wasn't. Someone had inserted an inline unit between the RBC and the GSMR modem, a device with a brand name that sounded like a suggestion, Quiet Link. It had one job, mirror traffic for diagnostics. It had one sin, write access for maintenance. Its MAC address did not belong to our inventory. Its serial number pulled up a purchase order from Mara. Federico looked at me. "Don't touch," he said. "I'm not touching," I said, and wrote down the serial number as if it were a hymn. We photographed. We documented. We sealed it with a plastic tag that reads if it's been violated by light. Paper and plastic can be friends in the right weather. We went to my lawyer. We wrote a complaint. We made it boring and specific, with exhibits numbered and cross-referenced, and not a single hysterical adjective. We filed it with the Procura. We filed a copy with ANSFISA. We filed one with the European Union Agency for Railways because if you want someone to read carefully, give it to a person in another country. Nordlicht's press office called it unfounded. Marathon Stone SRL published a photo of their office plant. RFI promised to collaborate fully. The Procura did something unexpected. They moved quickly. The Guardia di Finanza visited Marathon Stone. They took computers and a man in a soft blazer. They took a contract binder labeled Customer, Nordlicht. They looked surprised in that way law enforcement does when fiction turns out to be nonfiction written with 2 fonts. I slept that night as if sleep were a permit and someone had finally signed, and in the morning I found a photo slipped under my door. My own face, red-eyed on the fold-out couch, printed on glossy paper with cheap ink. On the back, people who live in glass boxes shouldn't throw stones. The handwriting was round, careful, and male. There was a coffee ring on the corner shaped like a signal that will haunt me forever. The deeper threat was not their devices. It was their narrative. They had started to call me a zealot. Zealots are easy to sacrifice because they don't bargain. My friends were tired. The paper pile was taller than me. The journalist had moved on to a minister's expense scandal because ministers never stop providing. I learned a lesson that should be taught in engineering school alongside calculus. The person who controls the postscript controls the story. They own the postscript, the press release, the corrigendum, the tweet. I had paper. Paper is slow, but it can take a blow. The false victory smelled sweet when it arrived. ANSFISA issued a provisional safety recommendation acknowledging that MD mode could be misused. They used the verb could like a robe. For a day, people who had not answered my emails learned my name and pronounced it kindly. That night my apartment was broken into, and the only thing stolen was a blue folder with my collection of hashes and key rotation receipts. My laptop was left open as if it had simply needed air. On the kitchen table they left a loose Torx screw, T20. It spun for a long time when I flicked it, humming like a song I would learn to hate. I called the police. They wrote a report that looked like a report. The officer asked if I had enemies. I said yes. He asked if they were the sort you can call by name. I said yes. He asked if I was sure I wanted to write them down. I said yes, and wrote them down, and heard the paper bristle at the intimacy. The next day, Nordlicht's counsel offered to settle. They would reinstate my license, retro-pay my lost days, and hire me as external advisor, integrity assurance, if I would sign that I had misunderstood something complicated. Their offer came on thick paper, with a watermark of their faith in themselves. "Where is the part where you admit maintenance dark?" I asked. "There is no such thing," he said. "Then why is MD in your code?" I asked. "For metadata," he said, and smiled like a person who has said a thing so many times it feels like furniture. "Watch me," I said, and he said nothing. I signed nothing. The false victory curdled into strategy. They would wait me out. They had more coffee. Waiting them out is slow murder. I decided to make them hurry. A sting is like a timetable. If one train is late, 2 trains meet in a place that looks like fate and smells like negligence. If you want people who select routes to reveal themselves, you give them a ghost to chase. Ghosts love corridors. I needed 3 pieces that didn't fit until they did. First, a legal, urgent reason to run a system-wide simulation. Second, a mechanism to make the wrongdoers do their wrongdoer thing where everyone could see. Third, a witness that wasn't me, because I had become a character, and characters, no matter how earnest, make bad witnesses. The legal reason came from a paragraph in a dusty directive requiring periodic fallback drills to demonstrate controlled behavior under degraded conditions. It had never been done because degraded conditions are embarrassing. I petitioned ANSFISA to enforce the letter of the paragraph, citing the recent could. I CCDRA. Bureaucrats love compliance like cats love warm squares of sun. They said yes. The way a bridge says yes to a truck it knows will leave it with stories. The mechanism was not a hack. It was paperwork. Quiet link boxes aren't evil, they let you see. But right is a choice. If you ask a person with a certain temperament to help in a crisis, he will take his favorite screwdriver to your skull. I wrote to Nordlicht and Marathon Stone through PC as if my pen were stainless steel. For the sake of transparency, during the upcoming drill we ask that all diagnostic devices be set to mirror-only mode. Please confirm by PC. The law of PC is simple. If you do. They confirmed. A man named Arturo at Marathon Stone wrote the words mirror only. He CC'd a person at Nordlicht with the initials AF. Again. The receipts hummed in my inbox like bees with legal pads. The witness, not me. I asked the court to appoint a CTU, a consultant technico de officio, neutral and nerdy. The court picked a woman whose doctoral thesis title was a paragraph. She wore her hair disciplined and her contempt for sloppiness like the second half of her scarf. She demanded to bring her own equipment. She demanded hash checks printed with timestamps, not that she disclosed them in a story. She demanded coffee at weird times. I loved her. We named the ghost Test Train 700. We assigned it to run a route that does not exist in real life, but that the software knows like a nursery rhyme, from Antera to Pietrafera with an unplanned dwell in Cincher. It would behave according to the book. It would fully obey signals that would whisper at people who like to be obeyed. The day of the drill, I was documentation again, my badge a little warmer from being used as an ID card at grocery stores. The CTU set up her own NTP server in the control room and made the RBC speak to it as if to a minister. She asked for the key rotation schedule. She printed it. She wrote the hash on the margin with the affection people reserve for pets in law. Test Train 700 left Antera in the computer and entered Pietrafera's RBC zone like a rumor in a wedding. The RBC sent movement authority exactly up to the block edge. The interlocking behaved like a butler with priorities. The real tracks shone in sunshine. The simulation ran and cables curled like sleeping snakes. At Cincher, where the quiet link had lived, the CTU looked at her traffic mirror and raised an eyebrow 1 millimeter. She saw a packet with a field that said right enable, true. The PC said mirror only. The man who had confirmed, mirror only, said later that perhaps someone had misclicked. Misclicks don't write byte-perfect fields that line up with features that don't exist on paper. On the simulation, the ghost train received a flicker of authority beyond the red. Not much. Just enough to clip a sentence half a clause beyond the period. The CTU isolated the packet and trapped it in a file. She copied the file to 3 drives. She sealed 2 with tape that said, open only with scissors and cause. She looked at me. She did not smile. It was better than a smile. Another, she said. We ran Test Train 700 again. Nordlicht called the control room to ask when they could assist with tuning. The CTU asked them to put it in writing. They did. We ran it again. At the 3rd run, the man at Marathon Stone whose PC had promised mirror only called from a number that resolves to unknown. He said, it is undesirable to put the system under stress at this time. He used the word undesirable like a belt. The CTU asked him to put that in writing. He hung up. We stopped the drill. We stayed stopped long enough to become a fact. The court ordered a seizure. The Guardia walked into Marathon Stone with a pelican case and a face like a terminus. They unplugged the quiet link and sealed it with a sticker that makes honesty itch. They left with more than they had when they arrived, including a man who said lawyers like it hurt. Nordlicht's counsel came to the control room and tried to be reasonable the way rain tries to be dry. We have always been clear, he said. Mirror only, the CTU said, and showed him his own PC. Never, he said, and the hash said otherwise. They suspended 2 executives with names like ancient titles. They issued a press release that spelled my name correctly, but with an adjective I had not applied to myself. Former. I had been demoted in the world beyond the room. It wasn't over. It was shapelier. We had the packet. We had the promise. We had the device with ink under its nails. We had a timetable of key rotations that glowed like a map to a treasure everyone had been pretending wasn't there. The sting had done something more important than catching a hand in a jar. It had forced the story onto paper in a way that didn't need me. A ghost train had carried a signature. A signature belongs to someone, and someone has a chair they don't want to vacate. The tender for the predictive maintenance expansion, a contract big enough to feed 3 companies and their 20 cousins, was scheduled for a week later. It belonged to Nordlicht in the minds of people who get used to writing names into blank boxes and letting the competition perform for sport. The law requires a public opening and the reading of discounts in a room that smells like plastic and foreclosure. They try to postpone. The CTU frowned at the word postpone. The judge liked the frown. I went to the opening with a suit I had not worn since a happy ceremony in another life. I sat in back with Federico and a man from the KMC who seemed to have grown a conscience and a beard in the same month. On the table sat a blue folder. It had a coffee ring in the shape of a green aspect, faint and true. It was not my folder. It was the folder of the man who was supposed to read names. The chair cleared his throat. He said the words he was supposed to say. He read the discounts. Nordlicht's was heroic, the sort that only makes sense if you can control a lever hidden behind a drape. The CTU wrote numbers on a pad and underlined a figure that meant the anomaly index one had been building on Sundays was humming. Observations. The chair said, a legal incantation that opens a door. People usually sit on their hands then. I stood. I have an observation, I said. I handed him a stack. A copy of the PC with mirror only, the CTU's hash of the ghost packet, a photo of the quiet link with its serial number, the key rotation schedule with the early jog and the handwritten hash, the excerpt from the certificate that said a physical key must exist where no key existed, and a printout of code from QX 51.2 showing how MD was parsed from a field named ironically as if words could hide inside themselves forever. I spoke in sentences that had a beginning and an end. I used numbers and page references. I avoided adjectives like potholes. When I was done, the room made a noise people make when a carriage sheds a wheel where everyone can see it and the wheel keeps rolling with its own ideas. Nordlicht's counsel stood. He said, we refute. He said, misunderstanding. He said, context. The CTU said, hash. The chair said, adjourn. The journalist, I thought had moved on, was in the doorway like a shadow with a pen. Federico squeezed my wrist like a man trying to transmit voltage through skin. They did not award the tender that day. The procura opened a formal investigation into manipulation of critical infrastructure. The agency issued a safety directive, not a recommendation, using the verb shall like a gavel. The RBCs reverted to a version that predated QX 51.2. MD mode no longer meant anything, a word that had lost its handle. The quiet links were inventoried, sealed, or binned. Someone wrote a memo that used the phrase, why did we let them plug that in? A question that should be printed. I got my badge back in an envelope. It smelled like storage and a little like apology. It opened the turnstiles again with a click that felt indecently tender. A week later, a small piece of metal arrived in another envelope, a Torx screw, T20, with a note that said courtesy of an unknown benefactor. I turned it in as evidence because I am not the sort of person who keeps trophies from men who leave coffee rings on other people's lives. They charged the man from Marathon Stone, whose PC had promised mirror only. They charged a Nordlicht VP with permitting unauthorized access. They charged nobody in particular with inventing MD, because some things are crimes and some things are just choices that didn't expect a witness. I went back to work, not to be heroic, but to be diligent. Diligence is a form of love in my trade. You put the right paper in the right folder. You label. You sign legibly. You leave a trail that could be followed by someone who hates you and still end up at truth. RFI promoted me sideways. Leave for documentation integrity, my badge said, which sounded like an insult and turned out to be a key. I rewrote the procedure for drills. I made MD a story we told new hires as a cautionary tale. If your test harness can write, it will write at the worst time at the worst length under the worst hands. I made people sign for Torx bits like they were controlled substances. I made us print more than we were comfortable with and trust less than we preferred. My apartment was unseized quietly, like a staged rescue. The landlord gifted me a bottle of something fizzy he could not pronounce. I bought a rug with a pattern of lines that cross and never quite touch. It looked like a track map that had given up on confusing anyone. I wrote down the chain of things that had mattered, the first scuff on the police baseplate, the peculiar jog in keys, the word mirror only, the early attendance to a drill nobody wanted to run, the CTU's frown, the blue folder's coffee ring, the Torx screw that hums when flicked. Small things tie big stories the way stitches keep skin honest. One afternoon, I stood in the interlocking room at Pietrafera and ran my fingers over the place where the quiet link had been. The cabinet was clean, holes patched, labels reprinted with machine neatness. You would never know there had been a snake sleeping there. I knew. Federico knew. The CTU would always know. The cabinet knew, in the way metal learns. A driver came by and leaned in the doorway. He was new, or young, or both. "Are you the one?" he asked, not specifying the one what. "I'm the one who likes paper," I said. He nodded like I had disclosed a habit and not a religion. "We talk about you," he said, and looked embarrassed. "In the canteen. With the bad coffee." "What do they say?" I asked. "They say you stopped a ghost," he said, and laughed because it was a stupid sentence that had made his life less likely to end on a page in the middle of a book he hadn't asked to be part of. "Tell them we did it," I said. "With receipts." He left. I pressed the print button on a machine that had survived 3 upgrades. It made that sound printing makes when paper and laser powder find each other surprising. My lawyer called with the details of a settlement I was not supposed to boast about. If you were to imagine a number, imagine the digits of pi until you get bored. It was not that, but it made the first year in the trade that had shaved my nerves feel honored. I gave half away to a fund that buys good coffee for control rooms and pays for children to visit trains and ask too many questions. Agency after erasure tastes best when shared. The journalist wrote a book. I fact-checked it for free because I like sentences that admit their limits. The CTU taught a course where the exam is a practical. Find the lie in a log and write the memo that will make a judge look interested. Federico learned to send fewer emails and more PC. His models acquired dust that would smell like nostalgia one day. Nordlicht changed their press agency. Marathon Stone moved offices. A new tender went to a company with a name that sounded less smug. The trains ran, which is the verb they were made for, and people forgot the story, which is the noun people choose when they have other things to worry about. I didn't forget. Forgetting is for machines that free memory to do more of the same mistake. Remembering is a job. You do it with forms, with signatures, with the ritual of the blue pen and the art of the exact copy. You do it with a stamp that lands with a sound like conscience. One evening, I stood behind the yellow line while a service breathed into the station. The platform smelled like brakes and fried anything. The arrival board shivered with updates. The voice in the ceiling tasted like metal and kindness. Across the track, a boy held a notebook and drew the shapes trains make when they are honest. I caught sight of a man who once wore a soft blazer and pretended mirror meant right. He looked thinner. He looked at me and then at his shoes. I was surprised by the absence of any emotion I could easily name. At home, my desk was tidy. On it, a blue folder, a Trodat stamp, a small hex of metal labeled T20 in a sealed bag, a printed copy of the CTU's hash with a paperclip that bridged nothing but held symbol and sheet together with domestic grace. The UB key lay like a promise kept. I wrote this on paper first. I numbered the pages. I wrote the protocol number I wish it had. It deserved its own accuracy. I placed a copy behind the manual for the fire alarm system because dullness protects better than drama. They crashed a train in my name. Paper, and I taught them that the next train carries the names you do not imagine it can, and it stops where receipts tell it to stop.